Hello, everyone, and welcome to Walker Reads. I am your host, MJ Walker. Today, I will be bringing you another installation in the series Rabinoe, Wizard Extraordinaire. If you enjoy what you are hearing, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support truly helps me to develop my channel and encourages me to continue writing what you enjoy so much. Without further ado, I bring you the next episode in Rabinoe, Wizard Extraordinaire. Episode 16, Upstream Turbulence. Rabinoe hiked along the river feeding James' family farm. He had been hiking for the better part of several hours, making slow, slogging progress through the thick underbrush. Rabinoe traveled wearily, constantly searching with his eyes and with his will for any signs of people. A river being poisoned didn't necessarily denote human intervention, but it was incredibly likely. And if that was indeed the case, the likelihood that Rabinoe would encounter someone not wishing for him to discover the source of the poison was all too real. So he moved cautiously and as quiet as he could manage, while trying not to think about what might occur if bad actors were awaiting him at the culmination of this hike. "I'd like to say," Eris spoke softly from Rabinoe's shoulders, "for the umpteenth time, this is incredibly foolish." "Noted," Rabinoe replied under his breath. "Thanks for your opinion." "Rabbit," Eris hissed, "this whole ordeal stinks of foul play." "And your solution is to let that poor farmer and his family suffer because we were too scared to investigate?" "There is a difference between boldness and sheer stupidity," Eris shot back. "And right now, you are straddling the line." "This kind of thing," Rabinoe began, "is exactly what I am on this pilgrimage for, Eris. I have the power to do something about this, and I intend to. So either be helpful or shut up." Eris sniffed appreciatively. "Fine." The cat was silent for several minutes as Rabinoe continued climbing through the plant life. It wasn't long before she broke the silence once more. "That man, James," she began thoughtfully, "he took the news rather well." "As could be expected, given the circumstances," Rabinoe replied. When he had first discovered that the river was being poisoned, Rabinoe had debated telling the man that he had found the source of the sickness or simply striking off to look for himself. After a moment of deliberation, he sought the man out, getting him out of the house and away from the family as he broke the news. "The river's being poisoned?" he had asked, aghast. "Hells, that's bad news." "I agree," Rabinoe had said, "which is why I'm going to go find out what is poisoning the river." "What?" James looked incredulous. "Look, I'm sure you're a very capable wizard and whatnot, but—" The man wrung his hands. "You are still just a child after all. What if this isn't just some bizarre accident?" "That is precisely why I have to go investigate," Rabinoe replied. "It's possible that nature has pulled some strings in this equation, and let us hope that is indeed the case. But if it isn't, I want to find out what is going on and why. And if the poisoning isn't stopped, it will kill off your whole field. I'm surprised you and your family haven't gotten sick from this water yet." "We have a well for drinking water," James replied slowly. "Do you really think someone might be behind this? I don't understand." "We don't know anything for certain," Rabinoe answered, "but I fully intend to find out." "Look," James said, "what if I come with you?" Rabinoe shook his head. "I'll work much better alone. Besides, if I do encounter anyone out there that may be behind this, I'll fight much easier without having to worry about keeping you safe." "Fight?" James looked around in exasperation, huffing several breaths before gathering himself. "This was a terrible idea. I don't want to put anyone in danger on my account, son. I'll just take care of this myself." "No, you will not," Eris said sharply, causing James to startle so badly he nearly tumbled over himself. He stared at Eris for several long moments before he spoke. Did that cat just talk? Yes, I did, Eris said before Rabinoe could say anything. Rabinoe sighed deeply, inclining his head towards Eris. This is Eris, the eternal cat. James could only stare, slack-jawed, as he attempted to comprehend what the two of them had said. Not only is Rabbit here fully capable of taking on this task, Eris said with authority, I accompany him everywhere he goes, and I am far more capable than he. Eris is right, Rabinoe continued, gritting his teeth while the cat spoke. Between the two of us, we can handle anything that comes our way. James just stared at Eris. How in the hells did that cat talk? I can do more than just talk, farmer, Eris said indignantly, proffering a large paw with claws extended. Would you like to find out for yourself? Eris, Rabinoe hissed. Be nice. He looked at James. To put it simply, Eris is a magical cat. She's been around magic for so long, she became magical herself. Furthermore, the depths of her power dwarf mine. Make no mistake, she is the stronger of us. Incredible, James muttered while he continued staring at Eris with awe. Absolutely incredible. So, Rabinoe said slowly, hinting at James to stop staring and to get back to business. You stay here with your family. No need to get everyone worried about where I've gone off to or what has happened. All they need to know is I am continuing my investigation. James nodded, tearing his gaze away from Eris and looking at Rabinoe once more. Right, he said. Got it. Rabinoe looked up at the sun, now beginning its descent from the noon sky in earnest. He didn't have endless sunlight, but it would still be several hours of good light before it began to waver in strength. Looking back to James, he said, Now, if the two of us do not return by morning, assume something has happened to prevent us from doing so. And if that does happen, you should gather your family and make for the nearest city large enough to have a garrison of the royal guard. Tell them what has happened and they can send for reinforcements. By morning? James asked, looking horrified. Do you really think it will take you that long? I honestly do not know, Rabinoe answered somberly. The origin of whatever pollutes the water could be as far back as the very source of the river. I don't think that is the case, though. If this was deliberate, as I suspect it to be, the pollutant would need to be far away enough to not be immediately uncovered, but close enough that the only one really affected is you and your farm. The greater the distance, the more the stuff dilutes and loses effectiveness, plus a much higher chance of the pollution being discovered by other people. James seemed to deflate as the weight of Rabinoe settled on him. Oof, he said, slowly taking in a deep breath and letting it deflate through his cheeks. That's heavy. I don't like this one bit, Rabinoe, but... He paused and looked back at the house, worry etched all over his face. If you are right, then this is the best course of action. Please, please be careful. We will be, Rabinoe smiled, relieved that the man didn't argue the point further. Oh, and Miss Eternal Cat? James said, looking at Eris. The cat perked up a little at this. Please, watch over Rabinoe. And so, Rabinoe, with Eris still perched upon his shoulders, continued cautiously following the river. The pair kept enough distance to be well hidden, but close enough to see the water. Rabinoe could sense the pollution in the river with his will, a sickly, sweet scent he was growing to recognize more acutely, and so he was confident that he would be able to locate the exact source. I do love the way he referred to me, Eris said airily. You should do that from now on, Rabbit. What are you getting on about? Rabinoe asked, distracted, as he made his way through a particularly thorny bush. You should call me Miss Eternal Cat, Eris said gleefully. That is how I wish to be addressed now. Eris scoffed. Rabinoe scoffed, excuse me. Fat chance of that, Eris. Nice try, though. Hells, you can be so insufferable, Eris hissed. Would it kill you to show a little deference? To you? Rabinoe raised an eyebrow. It just might. You act like I am some sort of tyrant, Eris said, haughty. Is that any way to treat your humble guardian? Is that how you see yourself? Rabinoe snorted. As my guardian? Please. Have I not guided your blundering efforts at will magic? She asked sharply. Have I not stayed by your side thus far, helping you along the way? Yeah, Rabinoe said slowly, but I attribute that to sheer boredom, your strong sense of superiority, and the distinct fact that you have no choice. Fine, she hissed. Be that way. Oh, I will, Rabinoe shot back. Now hush, I'm trying to focus. Rabinoe was beginning to climb a hill the river was running down. The trees grew thicker here. Consequently, the underbrush began to lighten up a bit. He traveled even more cautiously, the sickly sweet scent growing stronger. But there was also something else. Rabinoe began to sense a tingling sensation, much like a low vibration permeating the air. It was so faint he could hardly make it out, and the sickly sweet scent growing stronger helped to drown it out. Rabinoe began to feel uneasy. He had a feeling that something was very wrong, but he could not place what it was. Continuing his hike uphill, Rabinoe scoured his surroundings, scrutinizing every trunk and bush for signs of anything hiding, watching. Eris even sensed Rabinoe's rising anxiety and grew stiff on his shoulders, tensed and ready to pounce. Her small head pivoted on her shoulders, looking whichever way Rabinoe wasn't. In silent vigilance, the pair climbed the hill. Upon reaching its apex, the breeze carried along with it a stench that clobbered the pair so hard Rabinoe staggered to his knees, covering his face with a forearm, and Eris hissed viciously. The smell was a physical manifestation of the pollution Rabinoe had been sensing in the water. It was sickly sweet and revoltingly putrid. Rabinoe nearly retched, and Eris bounded from his shoulders, turning sideways in front of Rabinoe with her hackles raised. What in the hells is that stench? Rabinoe asked, gagging. Death, Eris replied while she scanned the hilltop. There is something dead nearby. That stench is the smell of a rotting corpse. Rabinoe looked up sharply, fighting to overpower his nausea. Something is dead? Could that be what is poisoning the river? At this point, Eris said softly, I would say that assertion very likely. Then we just need to find the, Rabinoe made a face, corpses, and remove them from the water. It may not be so easy, Rabbit. There is something very wrong with... Stop! She halted Rabinoe as he made to walk around her, causing him to freeze in his tracks. What is it? Rabinoe asked in alarm. We cannot go rushing in there, you fool, Eris spoke as she continued searching the hilltop with her eyes. Use your head for once. If you were the one responsible for this, going as far as polluting a river with death to poison that poor farmer, would you simply walk away after setting off your evil plans? Rabinoe felt the blood drain from his face. You think whoever did this is still here? The closer we get, the more I feel certain that this was no accident, Rabbit, Eris said softly. And if that is indeed the case, then yes, I think whoever is behind this lingers still. Rabinoe swore under his breath. So then what do we do? Eris scoffed. You are the wizard extraordinaire here, she said with derision. Figure it out. Rabinoe scowled at the cat, but did as he was told. He followed her lead and visually scanned the hilltop that they could see. The plateau was wide and quite spacious, with lush, vibrant plant life exploding from every surface. The sound of running water was a steady buzz in the background, accompanying the bustling insects and small animals as they went about their daily labors. Underneath that blanket of noise, many smaller sounds could be muted. The stench of death was still wafting heavily through the air, but as he grew accustomed to its presence, he also began to smell the moisture hanging in the air, the pollen of the blooming plants, and the heavy, rich smell of earth underneath it all. The wide plateau offered a plethora of places to hide, and the scenery provided more than enough cover to mask a clever hunter's presence. Rabinoe felt distinctly vulnerable. If a malicious persons were behind this, then they had the advantage in every aspect on this hilltop. If Rabinoe wished to avoid any traps and pitfalls, he had no choice but to make his way with extreme caution. Rabinoe thought through his approach. At first, he wanted to follow the river until he found whatever was polluting it, but he realized moving so close to the waterway would leave him vulnerable to anyone watching from nearby. So instead, Rabinoe moved away from the river, losing sight of it but keeping the sound of rushing water close. As he slowly worked his way further into the hilltop, he frequently searched with his will as well as his senses. That peculiar vibration that was nearly faint enough to be invisible still hung in the air. After Rabinoe's encounter with the fox, he could ascertain that vibration to be the shock waves emitted from will castings. The fact that he had a difficult time identifying and isolating the vibrations told him the magic was either very old or very well concealed. Neither possibility lent him much strength. Regardless of how he pondered the situation out, he kept landing on the same conclusion Eris had made. Whoever was behind this was likely still in the area, watching and waiting. Soon, Rabinoe spotted a small clearing through the trees. It was centered around the river, and from this distance, Rabinoe could see something large lying on the ground, motionless. It would likely be whatever was the cause of this investigation. However, Rabinoe had no desire to draw near just yet. He visually scanned the forest around him, widening his will as far as he could. Rabinoe could sense nothing. Calmly, he knelt on the ground next to Eris and whispered, "I'm not picking up on anyone's presence. Are you?" "No," Eris said quietly. "I sense nothing but what was already cast, and that horrible smell." Rabinoe nodded to himself. If there was someone watching them, they were waiting for just the right moment to strike, giving nothing away to the prying eyes of Rabinoe and Eris. If Rabinoe kept circling the corpse, widening his loop each time, he reckoned he would be able to find something. But considering the circumstances, anyone skilled enough to bring this plan to fruition would likely also be skilled enough to cover their tracks and stay invisible to him. Furthermore, to pretend that whoever was occupying this hilltop with them was not watching their every move would be foolish indeed. Rabinoe gritted his teeth and came to a decision. This would be perhaps one of his more reckless moves, but he gauged it would get the best response. Instead of wandering the hilltop, hoping to stumble across the perpetrator while also staying safe from them, Rabinoe headed straight for the clear trap in the clearing, the dead creature sitting in plain view. As he drew closer, Rabinoe watched around him, hoping that his approach might entice them to reveal themselves prematurely to no avail. Finally, Rabinoe stood, crouched, at the edge of the clearing, studying the scene before him. A large elk, clearly dead, lay rotting half in and half out of the flowing river. As Rabinoe studied the corpse, he noticed something strange. There were no insects feeding upon the body. None of nature's usual cleanup crew was present to feast upon the massive abundance of meat. No carrion eaters circled the sky, nor were they sitting in the trees. No insects, no signs of any small animals approaching the body. Nothing. Rabinoe closed his eyes and widened his awareness as far as he could push it. All around the dead elk, there seemed to be some sort of field, repelling the wildlife. In roughly a 10-foot circle, nearly half the space in the clearing, a perimeter of some sort had been erected, and it positively sang with will magic. Suddenly, Eris hissed, leaping onto Rabinoe's shoulders and pushing his head down. With a solid thunk, an arrow landed in the tree where Rabinoe's head had just resided. Rabinoe threw himself to the ground, looking around wildly. "Move, you fool!" Eris hissed as she crawled away from the clearing. Rabinoe made to follow, and another arrow slammed into the ground, inches from his face. Rabinoe made a quick calculation based on the angle of the first and second arrows, determining quickly that whoever had fired those arrows did so from a position of high ground. They were in the trees. Rabinoe rolled, sitting up against a tree trunk that should have blocked him from the position of the shooter. Another arrow slammed into the tree, the arrowhead blossoming out of the front and nearly grazing Rabinoe's cheek. The angle was slightly different than the rest. The shooter was moving. Rabinoe did some quick calculations, mentally figuring the position of the direction of the shooter. "Stop trying to outsmart them, Rabbit!" Eris hissed from the bushes nearby. "They are casting! Use that to your advantage!" Another arrow sailed into the bush where Eris resided, and she snarled, streaking from the bush to take cover deeper in the forest. Rabinoe thought about what Eris had said and closed his eyes once more, expanding his senses and waiting for the right moment. There! A snap of energy from the trees above and behind him. A second later, another arrow protruded from the trunk Rabinoe sheltered behind. This one was also fired from a different angle. The assailant was trying to move into a better position to fire from. They were also using will magic to fire their arrows more effectively, explaining why they were driving through the trees with such force. Rabinoe was pinned, with whomever was attacking him attempting to circle in for the kill. He had to take action, and soon, else he would end up as a human quiver. Making the decision, Rabinoe sprung forward, snatching up the arrow that had landed in the dirt, then turning and launching himself towards the shooter. Immediately, he sensed the snap of magic, felt the incoming arrows as they were released. Reaching out with his own will, Rabinoe changed the trajectory of one that was most likely to hit him and spun in place, catching the arrow as it sang through the air. He immediately felt the drain from safely catching the arrow, but his well was far from depleted. Rabinoe ran, dodging through the trees towards where the assailant was shooting from. As he ran, he sank his own will into the arrows, imbuing them with his power and his intent. More snaps and more arrows singing through the air towards him, but Rabinoe was ready. He simply stepped out of their flight path and kept moving, every shot triangulated where the shooter was. After the third volley, Rabinoe struck, dodging the arrows once more and flinging one of his own 2 prepared arrows at the exact location where the assailant should have been. The power of his throw was amplified by the power he had dumped into the arrow and guided by his will. It flew true, straight to where Rabinoe had wanted it to go. A cry of alarm sang through the air, and the treetops shivered as the assailant made to dodge the returned arrow. They apparently lost their footing, however, and went tumbling from the branches. They landed awkwardly, but sprang up immediately, attempting to orient on Rabinoe and fire off another arrow. But Rabinoe was ready for them. He was sprinting towards the assailant, and the second they turned to face him, he released his second arrow, causing them to take cover or be skewered. As he predicted, the assailant dodged around the tree and attempted to fire from the other side. Once again, Rabinoe was ready. He had closed the distance quickly and was nearly on top of his attacker by the time they circled the tree. Reaching out with both hands, Rabinoe released a powerful blast of energy, catching the attacker in the chest and lifting them clear off of their feet to slam into the ground. With a flourish, Rabinoe leapt upon their inert body, snatching the quiver from their side, removing one of the arrows, and holding the point to their throat. Checkmate. End. Episode 16. Upstream Turbulence. I hope you enjoy the episodes that I am releasing. And if you do, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Again, it truly helps me to develop my channel and keeps me encouraged to keep writing and keep recording. So if you enjoy, please don't forget to tune in every Monday morning at 7 a.m. Pacific Standard Time as I release each new episode. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day.